sounds good.
Right?
Okay,
I am now live. So
it
let's
says
see.
you're live.
Are we actually live? Let's
I have
figure it
no
out.
idea.
Let's
But
figure it out.
I still can't see you.
You still can't see me? Oh,
No.
yes, apparently we are live.
Okay.
I can now see me, and actually I can now share this. So if anybody's can anybody else see us out there in Facebook land? This is so funny because normally I'm like seeing myself and watching everything live, but this is not happening. So you know what? I'm just going to share this
Okay.
with my group and your
Okay.
group, and we'll see
Okay.
if this works. So if anyone's just
Well,
joining us right now, it's Jen and Iwan. We're using new technology, and so if we seem a little bit discombobulated, that is why. Oh dear. Okay, so we have that group, and then how else can I share this post?
well, you can just share it to like wherever you want to share it to, and then I can just, add it later.
Yeah,
I can
that's
add the link
true.
later.
Okay, so I think we're live. I can't see any comments or anything. So if you guys are out there, hopefully this is working. I'm gonna. There's a thing that says only visible to me. Join me live on this link. Um, oh, I think that's a few. Oh, Deidre says, hey, woohoo!
Okay.
So it's
Okay,
kind of
good.
working.
So it's
Okay.
kind of working.
Thank
Someone
you,
can see
Deidre.
us.
Thank you for that
Okay, good.
confirmation. This is hilarious. You still can't see me, but I can see you. But that's okay. Let's
Okay.
get started.
All right.
Let's get started because apparently we actually are live. So if you're watching this in the replay, just quick disclaimer. I'm using some new technology that neither of us know how to use, but we figured it out. Uh,
Entrepreneurial life.
exactly. In the wise words of a farmer I once knew, don't panic, it's organic. So we are very organic today. But
Yes.
anyway, we're going to get started. I have a wonderful and incredible woman speaking with me today. Some beautiful, beautiful wisdom that she's going to share. And for those of you who are new to me, new to everything, so we're going to chat today. We're going to also chat tomorrow at the same time, same place for part two. So this is part one of two. And I'm not sure how many fingers you guys can see because my screen is a little bit cut off here. But anyway, I am Jen Plotikoff, a sacred alchemist, fear alchemist, alchemist of the shadow. Hey, Stacy, thanks for your kindness and help. Oh my goodness. And I am here with this incredible being. She is a sacred brand strategist. I feel like you're also an alchemist. You're an incredible, powerful being, bearer of both the sacred feminine and sacred masculine energies. And I'm gonna let you take it away about a little bit about who you are and what you do and how you show up in the world and where
Hmm.
people can find you if they want to know a little bit more. We can get into that a little bit later, but
Okay. Sorry, I'm just getting a little more comfortable.
perfect. Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And thanks for, creating this. I'm excited to share today. So, Umoh Luna, I've been doing what I do for a long time. There's a lot of facets to it, but basically, I'm all about blending the sacred and the strategic to help my clients uplevel their business and their brand in a way that's in alignment with their soul while being profitable. Um, I do, I bring in a lot of woo woo stuff, and I'm also like a master strategist, and I love to play with those two pieces together. Um, and I've been diving deeper and deeper into like the foundation and creating um, energetic strategy so that everything that I do on the like more practical level is like much faster, much more effective, much more productive. So that's what I'm playing with, and this kind of ties in with that because this is stuff that, sacred anger or just anger in general, you might not think has anything to do with your business or your work in the world or, you know, anything really besides the fact that like sometimes you get mad. And there's more to the story.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I feel like you also just are such a beautiful soul in bringing really practicality into a magical realm. Like, I think sometimes we have a hard time with bridging, like, how we can actually implement things like strategy, especially if we are creative beings, especially if we are intuitive people. Specifically, with healers, I work a lot with other healers and emerging leaders and visionaries. And sometimes it's hard to kind of conceptualize. And there are ways to be strategic and work with energy in a really practical way. So that's one of the things I really love about the work that you bring. Um, and I wanted you to bring you on today to share a little bit about specifically, you kind of wanted to talk a little bit about anger. And I know there's a couple things that we're going to talk about today, and I'm not sure where you want to start with. So, because I know that you work a lot with other entrepreneurs, and here's the other thing: like, if you're a creative or if you're a healer in this world, like, you are an entrepreneur. A lot of us like to kind of avoid that, but I just wanted to state that because the way that we need to show up in the world is whole, and if we don't do that, we can often, like, self-doubt, and we don't really get to bring the gifts into the world that we're meant to bring. So I'm gonna, yeah,
Yeah, that's
leave you
actually a
with
really
that.
excellent starting point. Um, because yeah, a lot of people don't want to think of themselves as business people or as entrepreneurs, or they don't want to think of themselves as salespeople or marketers. But it's like if you have a business, if you do something, if you have work that's not from a job, you need to wear all of those hats in order for your thing to be successful, whatever it is, right? So I have one of my favorite YouTubers that I like to watch. I was watching a breakdown that she did yesterday, and she was talking about how she didn't understand what the job was going to entail and how much actual work it was going to have to do with things outside of the content of what she wanted to talk about, right? And so as people who want to create and birth like beautiful work into the world, we got to really own what does that mean to be a business person? What does that mean to be an entrepreneur? And it means that you have to wear a lot of different hats and you have to do things that are uncomfortable. You have to do things you don't always know how to do or that you don't think are in your genius. So it takes a lot of energy and a lot of fuel, right? And that's part of this is one of the pieces where anger can tie in. And one of the reasons why you're not doing as well as you would like, or you're not showing up, or you're not able to be consistent and sustain um, the at the level that you would like, right? Um,
I love that. I actually had a couple notes that I had that I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on and feedback of. And this was just that. So let's get into it because you kind of almost fed me into that. But just the
okay,
energy of anger. Like, I think there's a lot of fear around anger. And that's one of the reasons why I call it sacred anger, because it is a part of who we are. It's a part of human expression. It's part of our emotions. But it's particularly for women, we can have a lot of fear because it's really intense. So, what is, like, to you, what is the energy of anger and how do you work with it? Whether it's with your clients, with your own business, with your own life and personal relationships, how do you integrate that and how do you use it? Particularly because you mentioned energy management. What is the energy of it and how can you use it to actually work with your energy?
okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. But so, first, how I think of energy, if you have issues with being productive or motivated, then anger is a place that you probably could use some help, right? Um, so, anger is a hot, intense, fiery energy, right? Which means it's activating. So if you think of like you put the fire, you light the fire fire, and then whatever you put on top of it, it cooks, right? So either our fire can like just burn us up and burn us out, or we can use it to like to light things up, to light the way, to cook and like marinate something that we want to intentionally like add more fire and flavor to. So those are kind of like the two directions that it could possibly go in. Um, so how the very first thing to like how do we start to shift into a place where we can, instead of having our anger be something that is burning us out, something that's like lighting us up and available to use as like sacred fuel for our business. The first thing we have to do is, like you said, in our society we have a lot of negative story around anger. So um, just being angry can sometimes be a threat to our identity, especially if we're a spiritual person, we're a woman, if we put a lot of value on being nice or kind or a good person. Any of those things can have us be in denial and pushing our anger away because it's out of alignment with the identity that we're attached to, right? So that's the very first thing you have to do is be open and available to shifting your perception of your identity, right? So let go of the idea that to be a good person or to be a spiritual person, that means you never get angry, you never lose your temper, you're always calm, cool, and collected. That's inaccurate, right? And there's actually nobody that's like that. I've never met anyone like that. And if they are, they're faking it.
Yeah. Suppression.
You know? I mean, I don't know, but have you ever met anybody who was always calm, cool, and collected and never lost their temper?
Well, not who was not suppressing their anger at the same time. I mean, that was me, like, right? I mean, I was
Mm-hmm.
like your typical, like, if I disconnect from all the emotions, then I'll protect myself from the ones that are really awful, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
when I realized, for me, it manifested in my body, right? So I had chronic pain for 7 years. I had issues with energy management, chronic fatigue for 3 years. So totally, I don't believe that that is an aspect of the human condition.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if you're a spirit without a human body,
Right.
who knows?
Exactly.
It's been a while since I've
Exactly.
experienced that state, but in a human body, anger really is part of our identity and our condition. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the more we can actually work with it, the easier it is. But I was actually going to ask you too, if you have an example either from your own experience or from a client that you worked with, where like how this manifested and what in shifting the perception and kind of that letting go around the story of anger, like how did that change?
Mm-hmm.
What happened on the other side of that? What's the possibility?
Yeah, this I have a great example actually. So I'll just say also, I'm very into shadow work, and shadow work is a big part of how I access the sacred on the internal side. And so this is a big, strong piece because most of my clients are like intuitive, more sensitive, gentle, spiritual type of people. Especially most of my clients are women, not all, but um, that 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 skew on the side where here we deal with quote unquote negative emotions in two ways. Either we're like the aggressor or we're like, oh, the victim, right? That this is like kind of an oversimplification, but it's like when you're the aggressor, we turn it outwards, and then when we are like the victim or the person, we blame ourselves and we turn it inwards because we don't want to hurt anybody else, right? So just like you use that example of yourself, Jen, you turned it inwards and it manifested in these like physical issues of chronic pain in your body, right? So that's like super typical of someone who's like a more sensitive type because you don't want to hurt other people because you can feel the pain of hurting other people and you don't want to do it, right?
Yeah.
So we turn it inwards on ourselves and we use it against ourselves. So one of my clients, she fits this profile. She's a very powerful woman, but she's also very, very kind and sweet and gentle. And part of that is her real personality, and part of that is her programming, right? And as a lot of us as sensitives, that's our programming of what we got as children. And also it's a way that we protect ourselves and we think if we're nice and kind and we take care of everybody around us, then we'll be safe, right? Then we'll be okay. So, um, I kept trying to get her to work on this issue that she had with stuff from her childhood and her mom and her sister, and it was hard for her to like access this anger, and she kept like giving excuses and saying why it was okay. And this is another thing we try and do as like spiritual, quote unquote, enlightened people. We're like, well, she did this because blah blah blah, and it was because X, Y, and Z, and she had a hard time, and da 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 da. All of that is true, but that's in the intellect, right? And our emotions don't live in the intellect. They don't live in our heads. They live in our hearts and in our body, right? And so if we stay in the intellect, we can't access them. So if we're sitting here explaining away all the reasons logically why someone did terrible things to us, and like we experienced trauma, then we can't get to our own emotional landscape, right? So I had to work hard to get her to her anger, right? Because that wasn't her natural way. And then when we did, and it was like magical, it was beautiful, it was actually also super fun. And that's the other thing, we spend so much time trying to be like the good guy that we actually deny ourselves the fun of just kind of being the asshole sometimes. And like by that, I don't mean to anybody, I mean just with our own personal expression, right? So, um, so for example, I'm gonna go back to her, but like sometimes when I get really angry, I just in my house by myself, I'll just like cuss someone out, you know? And I'll be like, God damn it, you motherfucker, and I'll just yell at them by myself. Of course, I'm not going to do that to them. See, this is like the important piece of like personal responsibility. I'm yelling for my own personal benefit, not to hurt them or give them any of my anger because they don't need it, right? I need my anger. Um, and that's actually like super fun sometimes. And like I'll do that and then I'll just like end up laughing at myself. And like and it's not like this huge thing that is a burden and a weight that I carry with myself, right? Okay. So let me go back to my client. So after we did this like beautiful, intense shadow work with her and got her to be in that place of anger, she was able to create this huge shift in how she was showing up. And she let go of this old pattern of having to take care of everybody else first and not feeling like she could choose her and her business and what was most important to her. Right. And then all of a sudden it got a lot easier for her to show up in her business, to say yes to what was in alignment, to say no to what wasn't, to ask for the sale, to show up, be visible. And then her business started to work a lot better, a lot faster. So that's the example.
I love that. Yeah, I can definitely relate too, because I think sometimes and this is an example that I remember a friend of mine were having a conversation, and she's like, I don't even really know what healthy anger could look like. So I love that you kind of give that example, because sometimes it means, ranting, or if you're a writer, maybe it means journaling. But because,
Yes.
like you said, it lives in our cells, in our body. It's good to start to connect with that feeling of what that feels like. And I like to always say, it's good to kind of dip your toes in it. Sometimes I'll even like, offer an imagination of, being an animal. What would you feel like if you were like an angry cat or something, right? Sometimes it's
Mm-hmm.
safer to kind of go into that like role playing model to kind of ease our way into what that might look like, what that might feel like, without feeling like, that other element that you mentioned of like all the judgment that's around, like, I can't say
Mm-hmm.
those things because I'm a bad person, right?
Right.
That's a huge, huge shame, blame thing. That
Mm-hmm.
obviously, from a society perspective, we need to look at. But what are some
Right.
ways we can kind of start to play with this energy a little bit more? Like you mentioned, kind of diving into like, what are some little ways that for a lot of us who are maybe just starting out in this practice,
Mm-hmm.
what are some ways to kind of play with that can start to be safe and feel safe?
Yeah, well, I'm going to give you a couple of steps before we go there. So let's go back first to the permission, because the permission to be angry is huge, right?
Yeah.
Um, so this is going to sound strange, but I literally will, because I have that part of myself that doesn't like that I'm angry. This is part of my shadow that I don't want to be an angry person. I don't like that I have a temper, right? I don't like these things about myself. I want them to go away. However, I know that's not in service to myself and that's not going to happen. And it's like, this is part of who I am. So actually, if I want that part of myself to no longer have a negative energy and I want that to not be running me subconsciously and causing drama and chaos and distraction in my life, I first have to embrace it, right? That's the very first thing. So I say this is in the service of giving myself permission to even be who I am and experience who I'm experiencing because I can't do anything else until I get that down. I'll literally walk around and say, I'm angry. I'm angry. I'm angry. I'm an angry person. I'm an angry person, and that's okay. I'm an angry person, and that's okay. And I'll just keep repeating it to myself until I get past that layer of shame and cringe that I feel around myself when I say that out loud, right? And then I just keep breathing, and I'll sometimes do this while I'm walking. I like to pace around in my house, or I'll go for a walk in my neighborhood, and I'll be quiet or I'll mutter to myself. I won't be like walking down the street. I'm an angry person. But that's like, okay, first you have to just get in the doorway before you can even do any work. You just have to be like okay with the fact that you have that feeling and emotion, right? And then the next piece is like, okay, now that I'm giving myself permission, now I have to like own that this is my anger, right? So this is where we get the distinction that's really important between, and this is the part where we get afraid, right? That if we're angry, we're going to hurt somebody. This is a big piece of it. So that's why it's like when you do this work with your anger, it's about you. It's not about the other person and or situation or whatever it is, right? So it's like giving yourself permission to own the fact that you're angry and make space for it, right? So by doing that, it's like, okay, first you give yourself permission, you acknowledge that you're angry, and then you have to like say, okay, I'm going to take some time to deal with this. I'm going to take some time to process this. I'm going to go away from the people or the situation. So for me, the angrier I get, the more calm, cool, and collected I am, right? Because this is just my personality. I know that if I'm super angry, and if I even let like one little tiny bit of it out, I'm probably gonna flip out. So I just go like shoom and I tuck it all in, which can be unhealthy, but it's not unhealthy because I'm doing it intentionally. And I get away from the person or the situation that's making me extremely angry as fast as I can so I can get to a safe space to be with my anger where I don't put it on to anybody else, right? I don't like vomit it onto other people. Okay, so now we can talk about how to play with it. So there's lots of different ways, but like you said, one thing is to write like an angry letter, and this is like really beautiful. So my therapist told me to do this. I don't know, maybe like 15 years ago with my dad, and she was just like write an angry letter to him about like all the things that you're mad about and make it like as mean as possible. And I was like, I didn't want to do it because I was afraid of the intensity of my anger and I didn't want to unleash it, right? That's another thing we're afraid of. Like, if I let myself feel all this intense anger that I've been repressing and managing and holding in for so long in service of being a nice person or being spiritual, like I'm not going to be able to control it and I'm just going to blow or it's never going to end, you know? So these were my fears in writing this letter. But I was like, okay, I'm going to surrender to the process. I trust her. I'm going to do it, right? So and I wrote a very mean letter. I was like, I fucking hate you. You're a shitty, terrible father. You suck. You're never there for me. Like, here's all the things I hate about how you are in the world and how you treated my mom and blah 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 blah. Right, on and on and on. Like super mean. Nothing nice. Not a good person letter. Right. And I got enraged when I wrote it. I got really mad and then I got kind of pissed off at my therapist, like, you tricked me. And now I'm mad and like, what do I do? And it's like, you know what? Sometimes we don't have to do anything with it. Like we don't have to do something with it. We can just allow ourselves to feel the feeling. And the reason that we think we have to do something with it is because we don't like the fact that we're feeling it and we're not giving ourselves permission to feel it. And we're not giving ourselves permission to let that be in alignment with our identity, right? So once again, going back to like giving yourself that permission to have a new story about what it means to be a spiritual person, right? What it means to be a good person, whatever your thing is. So it's like, okay, I I just let myself be angry and I literally read that letter over and over again every single day for like a week. And every time I would read it, I would get angry again. But then I would I noticed it started to get less and less, right? Each day. And then on like the seventh or eighth day, when I read the letter, I just started crying and like something inside of me cracked open. And I wasn't angry at my dad anymore. And I saw the humanity in him. I remember I was washing the dishes and I was listening to Sade, and all of a sudden, I had so much compassion for him. Like, my dad came here when he was in his 20s from another country. He had to deal with a lot of racism. He had to deal with all kinds of crazy stuff because my dad's black and my mom's white. And he couldn't, he had a hard time with finding a job. And like at home, he had, he was a teacher, he was doing well, he had like some level of success. And then here it was like the exact opposite, none of his degrees counted, all these things, right? And then he had all these kids, and I just realized he was here alone without his family and his culture. And instead of me being angry, I just had this huge outpouring of compassion. I started crying, and like I wrote him this like letter, this like really long letter, and I sent it to him in the mail, and it was like super powerful for him, and we had this like beautiful healing, and like that was the beginning of us having like a real healthy relationship, right? Which in tune is affected all my other relationships with men, right? Which also affects my relationship with my ability to be in the world and do my work, right? So it all has this beautiful ripple effect.
Yeah.
And so that's one example. That's one way.
I really love that. There's a lot there, and we just have a few more minutes today. Of course, we're going to continue this conversation tomorrow, but I just wanted to there's a few key things that I heard in the story that were really important, and I just wanted to reiterate them. Just for anyone who is watching this now or in the replay, one is the process that it took you to get to the place of compassion. And I think one of the things is because of that story of wanting to jump there, we skip over all the steps that are necessary and required. Yes. And so, even though we don't have time right now to kind of get into all of the details of, the role that anger plays in, for example, our boundaries, our autonomy, our value and who we are, which of course, all of those aspects are super tied into, how we show up in the world with the work that we do, everything, right? How we show up in our relationships, everything. And I love how you kind of tie that into it requires anger is the kind of the energy that allows for that transformative push to happen, because we need the intensity of it. We need that like power, right? Like it's not going to happen by like tying a little sparkly bow on top, even though that's what we want. Damn it. Exactly. We just want it to be like easy and fluffy and like simple. But it's like when you're working with, it's like, think about any island chain that was created by volcanic eruptions. It's super destructive. Mm-hmm. And so Pele is a wonderful goddess to kind of look into if you're into like archetypes, because there's that creation, destruction, synergy that you describe. So I just wanted to kind of really honor that, because often we want the result that's on the other side, but we need to also give ourselves permission, the willingness to go through the process, go through the steps, go through the discomfort that's required. And also the truth. I love how that you were honest with yourself. Like when we write the letter, and sometimes it's hard to get there. And I get that. I definitely have been, doing some serious writing with some, abusive relationship dynamics that are in my own realm and being. And, you get nasty, and it's important to get nasty, because the other thing I just wanted to add was, even though we don't want to think those thoughts, their inner field, their inner energy
Right.
field.
They're already there.
They're already there.
Hmm.
Exactly. So when you bring them down on paper, you bring them down to truth, you get to actually witness them, and then you can let them go. You can't just let them go. You can't, otherwise, you're just going to keep burning fake letters.
Hmm.
Right? That's
Exactly.
true. It's fake.
Exactly.
But once you
Right.
can be honest with yourself about it and sit with that, and it takes some time, being compassionate and forgiving yourself for what you're wanting to write and say and express and yell into your pillow, or
Hmm.
however it is you want to, rage. But it's important because, particularly, I work a lot with people with trauma, and with trauma work, to get to that place of compassion, you need rage and hatred, which are kind of like the more extreme, but you need those raging rapids emotions to be
Hmm.
able to actually burn through all the shit that we're trying to burn through
Exactly.
to get to the other
Yeah.
side.
Yes.
So I
The
just
only
wanted
way
to,
out is through.
exactly. I just wanted to reiterate that, because it's so key to working with that. And I think it's when we're kind of like, there's a trepidation sometimes that can happen when we're like entering into that contract or entering into that space of like,
Mhm.
I don't really want to be, or even just like saying, like, when you were saying, I'm an angry person, I'm like, I'm not an angry person. I have angry feelings. Like
Right.
needing to separate. And sometimes that's
And
helpful.
it's whatever works for you. For me,
Exactly.
it's important for me to say that to myself, because then it's like I'm an angry person and it's okay. Then it's easier for me to acknowledge to myself my anger and my emotions. If I say I'm not an angry person, then it's easy. It's harder for me to get in touch with those feelings when they come. That's just me. You can find whatever doorway works for you. You know.
Exactly, exactly. And for me, I've like really connected with being able to recognize and then say, "Oh, I feel angry right now," and then remove myself and allow myself to feel the anger. Also, it kind of gives me the permission to feel the anger, knowing that it's not a permanent state. Because when we feel something,
Mhm.
it's not like identifying who we are, which again,
Right.
that like permission to be like, I can be angry, I can be all of these things. It's part of my experience as a human being. So again, like however that works for you, whoever is
Mhm.
watching, you know, finding your way to be able to give yourself that permission is super important. And
Yeah.
I love that element, going back to the story with your client too, how these gifts help us to show up in the world, how it helps us to repair, like with your gift with your dad, your relationship with him and the
Mhm.
masculine. And, working with business and entrepreneurs, we've talked about this before, you mentioning that entrepreneurialism can be a really sacred masculine energy. And we need to be able to like be with that and own that and be in that energy. And if we can't heal and repair our own elements with that energy, it's very difficult to make it work, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And like, and I'll say, I think I love that you brought this up. And I think like, the statistics on like, women that are abused is very high, right? Most women have experienced sexual abuse, rape, sexual assault, something, at, physical abuse at the hands of a man, right? So there's usually a lot of work for us to untangle with our experience of the masculine. And yeah, and if we don't do that, that definitely can affect our ability to own our own masculine energy and to use it and to have it be in service to whatever our mission is that we're creating in the world. And I'm super passionate about the feminine, and I love the idea, and I do work hard to bring the feminine into business. And I don't believe in the idea of doing business without the masculine. I don't think it's possible. you know so if you can't be with your own masculine energy, like that might be another reason why you can't get what you want in the world, or why you're not making the kind of money you want to make or the success that you want to create, right? um, and so I just want to say about that, it might be a subtle thing, but like this fear of people. And the other thing on the other side of the anger is like the fear of other people being angry with us, right? It's like, well, we have to be like, this is that like kind of unhealthy version of the feminine. Like we have to be nice and everyone has to like us all the time. But if that's how the way you're operating, you can't get anything done. you know, you can't create traction and momentum in your business.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to add on to that too, if you're a visionary, a lot of the time what you're trying to bring into the world doesn't exist yet. And so people aren't going to necessarily get you and get it and
Exactly.
have the confidence that's required to birth something. You've ever, well, you're a mama. Giving birth to a human is a very vulnerable experience, but it also requires a
About
lot of
that too. We don't have time today, but I can talk about the birth
power.
and all of that experience and how that like forged me in a way
Yeah.
that I was not expecting, you know.
Yeah.
So tomorrow I want to talk about. So today I wanted to talk more about the internal landscape of how this works, and the more broad strokes. And then tomorrow I want to talk more about like, okay, what are the specifics of how we can channel and leverage our anger and make our anger sacred so that we can use it as fuel for our business and our brand.
I love that. Perfect. So that's super amazing. I'm super excited to get into that tomorrow. Again, if you're just joining us here or if you're meeting us somewhere on the replay, we're going to be streaming on the 18th at 3:30 Pacific time right here on my personal timeline on Facebook. And now that we got the tech kind of figured out, hopefully the
Yeah.
intro to the video will be a little bit more smooth
A
and
little smoother.
and just in case you're really curious and you want to dive deep into Umoh's world, where can we find you? I know I've linked you as well, but where can we find you? And what are anything that you kind of wanted to share? Um,
Yeah. You can find me on Facebook. That's where I play the most. I'm trying to get on Instagram, but it's hard for me to manage multiple platforms at once.
there you
But yeah, I have a Facebook group called the Dark Temple, which is all about like doing this deep inner work that's sometimes dark and scary, but one of my gifts is making the dark delicious. So uh, if you feel you're enticed, come join the group and play with us.
Amazing. Awesome. And yeah, I'm a part of your group, and it is amazing and delicious. And the downloads that you bring are spectacular. So yeah, I really, really
Thank
appreciate the
you.
work that you're doing, and particularly in this world of business and entrepreneurship. And we're kind of in this really juicy time that business and commerce and how the world works is changing. And I think there's a lot of people who want to be a part of that. So if that's you and that speaks to you, I think it's really important. This is an important conversation to dive into, and this is an important community to be a part of because it can be much, much better. And we're part of that solution. So awesome. Is there anything else that you wanted to say before we sign off for the day?
Um, oh, I just would want to say that this is the last thing I want to say. As far as like dealing with the anger and creating a new relationship, it's a process and you kind of have to be willing to get out of balance in order to be in balance. So there will be a time where you might say something to someone that you don't mean to, or you might hurt someone's feelings, or you might show up in a way that's not in alignment with who you want to be. And that's okay. And that's part of the process. And the most important thing is to go back and say that you're sorry and let that person know that you care about how they feel and that that wasn't your intention. And then be quiet and like listen to what their experience is and what they're asking you for.
I love that. I love that. And I'm just going to add into support, whether it's your community, my community, both communities, whether
Mm-hmm.
you have like a women's circle or whatever, whether you're working with a coach, if you're looking for a coach,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of
it's
stuff we can't see for ourselves.
Exactly, exactly. And that's one of the things, my challenge has always been, I am really good at figuring things out on my own. And I realize when I work with other people, when I pair with the right relationship, and right relationship is super important. We
Hmm.
have to be discerning with that. But when we are in right relationship, it is exponentially, it holds us in a much bigger way and it helps us to grow much more quickly with a lot more ease. We're dealing with a lot of uncomfortable stuff, but having that right support can really help us. You even mentioned, like even with that letter writing, I mean, I work with a therapist too. We need to have other people in our lives that are helping
Hmm.
support our process and our journey. So that's super important. And there's, of course, multiple ways to do that. So I love that. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom, your grace, your light, and your shadows that you're willing to share with all of us. And yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. See you all
Thank you for
tomorrow.
having me. And
Thank
I'm
you.
excited for tomorrow.
Me too. Okay, loves. Okay, everyone, we're going to sign off. I'm going to try to figure out how to stop this. Be live. Have a beautiful rest of your Tuesday. Have a wonderful night.
Bye.
So
Thanks,
much love to
everyone.
you. Ciao.